November edition of the Functions webcast. And I'm Eduardo Laureano.
And I'm Chris Gillum.
And we're excited to talk to you guys about what we're up to. Just so much happened. Every time we come here, I feel like we've done at least 3 to 4 new things. So we'll talk about some of those. As you guys probably know, right now, as we're here doing this webcast, there's also the Microsoft Connect conference going on. Scott presented yesterday, tons of excitement around multiple areas, but of course, Azure Functions too. So yes, that's some of the stuff we want to talk about. Just go through the announcements and then and show a few things so you can see them in action. And at the end, we'll go through some Q&A. Thanks a lot for submitting questions beforehand. It's really great questions. Some tough ones too, but we'll get to it.
Yeah, we like tough questions. We're okay with that. Keep sending those.
That's why you're here, because Chris can take some of the real tough questions. Okay. So let's see, where do we start? Let's start with our announcements. Let's talk about, just recap what we talked in Connect. So one of the things I have to show, and we published in our blog, which you guys can access, is Azure Functions proxies. It's something have been sort of baking and had the backend for a while now, and we got a lot of great customer feedback, and now we're finally generally available. Super excited about it. This is Alex on the video. I think he'll be here one of these days to present next time. And what it is, proxies is the way for you to manage your APIs with functions. Obviously, functions were HTTP naturally, but you can also add proxies to it. And for that, you can do route composition. You can change your request response override. The blog goes into a lot of details what we did, but now we feel like it's ready for production. Bring your workloads to it. Send us your questions. I'll just flip over and just show you real quick in case someone hasn't seen how to use it. It's right there in the Azure portal. I'll zoom in a bit so you can see. And right where you can see your functions, you have also an entry here for proxies, and you can do a new proxies, and you get this UI here. This translates to a JSON file that you could edit as well, but you can do all the controls of the UI. But yeah, check out proxies, now generally available. Super excited about it. That is one of the announcements. Number 2, functions on IoT Edge. So one thing we had was IoT Hub integration we had before, and that was great, but required for a lot of your functions that are processing those IoT events, and they were very verbose, to be in the cloud. Now with IoT Edge, you can have those functions running on your devices itself. So very powerful. If you think of a thermostat, instead of sending that data to the cloud to be processed, you can have functions that process that information right there. Very exciting. A lot of excitement around IoT Edge, but we have functions on it. And it's the usual functions experience. Visual Studio Code, you can develop and you build that into an image that goes into your IoT Edge, and then boom, you can do that in IoT Edge. So super cool. Number 3, but I'll let you talk about number 3.
Sure. So number 3 is functions on Linux. So we finally did it. Normally, as you may have already known, functions runs on Windows VMs inside of Azure. And, that's worked pretty well for us, but a lot of folks have been wanting, a little bit of Linux love as well. So recently we had, the Functions 2.0 release, which is a big release for us, runs on .NET Core, allows us to do a lot of cool things, including cross-platform. So first thing we enabled for everybody was, hey, look, I can do local development on a Mac or on Linux, and that was great. But what if I want to, push that onto a Linux VM? What if I have some node dependencies, which or in a something that we can only do on Linux?
It brings in a lot of dependencies that we normally wouldn't have.
Right, exactly. And so so now we have that capability. Basically, there's an image on Docker Hub that you can go and grab that and deploy it on web apps for Linux.
Yep.
And go ahead and have some functions as a service on Linux. And it's kind of funny, like if you're a kind of serverless fanboy like I am, you see some of these debates on Twitter and conversations about, well, containers versus serverless, which one's better, But we give you a little bit of both, I think, with this. It's like we have our container images, which you can go and deploy, and you can have functions running inside of it. So a little bit of best both
Yeah,
worlds
it's great to mention it. And it builds upon the app service release that we had for app service on Linux and containers. So it's just functions running on top of that infrastructure. And as you guys probably know, we're built on top of app service. So we're trying to leverage a lot of the benefits of app service and bring that to functions. So it's in preview right now, right?
Yep,
and
preview.
It's dedicated, right? So we aim to have like the serverless offering for Linux in the future.
Yeah, and obviously because it's a container, you can also download it locally, host it on, your local machine for development too. And we've seen some people do that. Like some people, will download the full SDK to do development on, their local device.
Yep.
But you can also just take that container and immediately have, some good functions that you can play with locally too.
Yeah, really curious what you guys are gonna do with it, and yeah, give us feedback of what you think of the feature. We're excited to release it. Let's see, what else is going on? So last time we were here, we talked about serverless conf that happened. There was a serverless conf in Japan as well. I saw all the tweets. I couldn't read any of them, but looked at their interesting stuff. You seem to be able to read them.
I can read some of it. So I study Japanese, and so the surprising to me, but a pleasant surprise for me that, Japanese people love it. Maybe I can read what they're saying.
So the tweets were positive.
Yeah, very positive. They love functions in Japan. They love serverless in Japan. So
yeah, and what one of the things we talked in both serverless confs now is durable functions. So it was one of the things like they got super excited about just the amount of scenarios you can do with it. And we're super happy to have you here. So maybe you can talk to us a little bit more about it as you're the man behind durable functions.
Sure. So, might as well talk about durable functions since I'm here. So if you haven't seen it before, durable functions is a preview extension on Azure Functions, and we've got this fancy documentation on docs.microsoft.com now. We've talked
I gotta
about
say that's probably our champion documentation right there. Like it's really rich, really cool.
Yeah, definitely check it out, read it. There's a lot of stuff that you can learn about here on how to use it successfully. So we have talked about durable functions in one of our previous webcasts, but so I don't want to go over the same things that we went over there, but I thought maybe I'd show a different pattern, which we haven't really shown much before, which is, we call it pattern number 4, the stateful singletons. The idea being that you can have some function, which is basically long running, kind of like an eternal running function, which receives events, and can keep track, maintain some local state. If you're familiar with distributed systems like the actor model, it's kind of like that. We don't call them actors because they don't have all the same characteristics as actors, but if you understand what those are, then you'll easily understand what this is. So one of the patterns that I'll show you guys real quick is the stateful singleton, but specifically a counter function. Basically, it's something where you can send events to this function, and it'll keep track of a counter. And normally in cloud environments, this is actually surprisingly difficult to implement. And so that's why I thought it might be interesting to show it off to you guys as part of this talk. So anyways, we have this orchestrator function. I'm calling it E3 counter.
So this one's not the regular function. It's the durable one.
Correct. And so you can see we have this orchestration trigger.
Oh, that's what indicates it's
parameter right here.
one.
Yes. So that's how you know that, okay, this is durable functions now.
Mm-hmm.
And then basically, one of the interesting things that it does, so you have this counter context thing. And this allows you to do some of the interesting orchestration things. We get some inputs. That's basically our counter state. And then basically what's going to happen is we're going to call wait for external event. And that's going to cause the function to go to sleep. And so what does that mean, go to sleep? Well, it means that basically it stops running and it's going to wait for some input. And while it's stopped, you're not going to get billed, right? Nice. You're running this in the consumption plan, obviously sleeping or waiting for something that could be expensive because you're charged for time. Not in this case. We will actually put this to sleep and stop billing for you.
But your durable function is running or somehow
definitely right. So if VM goes down and comes up somewhere else, everything is fine. It's still going to resume where you left off. So what I'm going to show is we're going to send an event named operation to this. We're going to be able to receive that. It's going to wake up the function. It's going to keep running. We're going to say, hey, did you want to do an increment? Did you want to do a decrement? And we're going to update this counter state. And then we're going to call this continuous new method here, which basically says, okay, restart the current function. And here's the new state, which is whatever the new value of the counter is. So
Nice.
as you can see, we can send increment commands to, over time increment this thing. And this function could potentially run forever, right? And just continuously restarting itself and updating its counter state.
And the function itself doesn't have the state, like it picks up that counter state parameter and executes just like any other execution of a regular function.
Yep. This is just regular function execution. So I'll quickly show that. And basically what I have here is I have a simple HTTP start function, HTTP trigger, which I'm going to use to actually start this new counter. So let me switch over to my command line here. And let's see. So I'm just going to send an HTTP post. So let me start actually my local runtime here. That would be useful. So I'm just going to do F5 on this function. By the way, this is in the samples project that we have online too, if you want to play with this yourself.
Oh, nice.
So we're going to go ahead and start up the functions host locally. It sees a whole bunch of functions that I have, and then we get this this nice HTTP start function URL. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. I'm going to switch over here. I already have it pasted in here, and I'm saying I want to run my counter sample. So let's go ahead and send an HTTP post to that. By the way, I'm using HTTP py in case you're wondering what is this funny command. I like it better than curl, so I'm using that one. Okay, so something happened. We got a 202 accepted. This orchestration function started running. And so now, if I grab this location URL here, I can send an HTTP get to that, and I can see, all right, what's going on with this thing? I just ran it. What's the status? Okay, so the function is running. We can see that. Great. Input and output is null because I didn't actually send it any parameters. So next thing I want to do is, now we saw this before, that it's, let me switch over to the right one. So it's waiting now. It's waiting for that external event, which I talked about before, for something called operation. So now what we can do is we can actually use this URL right here, send event post URI, to actually send it a command.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So I'm going to go ahead and scroll down here. I'm going to say HTTP post, and then I'm going to paste in that URL. Now I have to change this a little bit here. So where it says event name, I'm going to go ahead and say operation. Right? What is the operation that we want to do? Now, we're waiting for some specific data too, right? Like we're waiting for some string value,
Got it. Okay.
which represents the operation. So I need to also send that information. So I'm gonna say I want to do an increment. And then I'm just gonna pipe that into this HTTP post. So I'm gonna run that, and okay, it was accepted. And something happens. So now if we actually go back and do another get to get the status of this thing, we can see now that it has an output of 1. Okay, so something changed. There's some state. Like we're keeping track of the counter. Now let's say I want to do the same thing again. Go ahead and send that a second time.
I can guess the result, I think.
You may be able to guess the results, unless something weird happens with the demo here. But yeah, okay, input is 2,
Oh, cool.
and we could keep doing that for ever and ever. But you can imagine the types of scenarios that you could do with something like this, right? I have a function which is basically listening for inputs and keeping track of some state. And like I said, this thing could be running forever. You could imagine some interesting IoT-like scenarios.
Oh, absolutely.
Where maybe I'm wearing a device and I'm keeping track of my step counts and it's pushing it up to this function. And again, this is really cheap to run too, because I didn't have to host a VM that's constantly listening for events. This is just a function. You're only getting billed for the small amount of time where it's actually handling the message and updating its state, which is super fast.
So you pay for the orchestrator doing that handling and the function itself running, but that's it and nothing else.
Yeah, just for the time that you're running. So it's
cool.
pretty neat. Again, just a reminder, this is all in preview. And so, there are some, you may run into some hiccups here and there, trying out some of these things. But of course, if you play with it, you find an issue, check out our GitHub, open an issue there, give us some feedback. We'd love to hear it.
Excellent, excellent. And although I said 3 things, those are the 3 things our team did, but we partner very closely with the other teams around Microsoft, and the Visual Studio team did a lot of improvements on the Visual Studio tooling. And it's a real nice blog post. As I'm talking about those features, I'm showing you guys the blog post where you can access later. Maybe we can post them to the chat so people can access them. But that's the work Visual Studio team did. I'm just going to show it in action because it's so easy to do. So with VS 15.5, you now have a function plugin, and you see some of the nice things we've done in functions. So you could in Visual Studio just regularly start a project for you to develop your functions locally. I'm not going to do anything fancy here. You could name your project if you wanted to. Webcast. And what it's cool here, and that's the new thing on the drop-down, and we talked in previous webcasts before, we now have the Runtime V1 and V2. V2 is the one that with the .NET Core, so it's portable, and you can run that on a Mac and Linux, and your pieces can run everywhere. And now you can pick which version of your functions runtime you want to use right there.
Awesome. What's
also cool, and that was funny because when I saw this like a few days ago, we didn't have the nice little icons now for the templates. That's also brand new stuff. So I could pick HTTP trigger. The other thing that's cool is you could pick your storage account, but let's say you don't want to pick your Azure Storage account quite yet because you're doing just your local development. There's a storage emulator now that you can use for you to do your local development. And once you do that, you're off to the races and you can do your local development, like remote debugging, telesense, all the nice things about Visual Studio. So sorry, I said 3 announcements. There are actually 4 because I added on the Visual Studio one.
No, but those were good ones. Yeah, glad we got those in there.
Those are great. And that was like the main stuff we're going to show and announce. We always love taking the time to just answer the questions. So I think, well, could switch to that and answer some of the questions. There's some that came beforehand that we can just parse through. We eliminated all the questions from the team. Like we just picked real customer questions to answer. So I think we should do those. So let's see. So Chris, here's what I'm gonna do. If I find them hard, I'm gonna ask you. If you find them easy, you can ask me. So
right, I'll be the fall guy.
All right. Let's start one here from David. He's asking about Node 8. When's Node 8 coming? For him, that's a hard stopper, and he says that although we praise and have all the glory on async await in C#, he would expect faster adoption of Node. So he's saying, let's do this. So he's obviously excited. So what do you know about Node 8?
Yeah, well, just to set context for people who've used Functions 1.0, we've supported Node for a while now, but we've been pinned at a particular version. I think it was like Node 6, was it? Yeah, and so now obviously if you want to use the latest and greatest, that's a problem, hence David's question. But with Functions 2.0, what we kind of re-architected things, which allows us to kind of expand on, the way in which we support languages. So with Functions 2.0 now, we are able to support Node 8, or basically any version of Node for that matter. And so, definitely keep your eye on Functions 2.0. We can absolutely support Node 8 on that.
Great. Awesome. Okay. All right. Question number 2 here from Jens. And will there be a tier that support longer timeout? Currently, standard is 5 minutes, extendable to 10 minutes. What about 1 hour timeout? I guess you kind of cover that, but maybe.
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways that you can look at this. If you're just doing like raw compute and you're like, man, I need like 30 minutes or an hour, to do this image processing or something like that. Usually what we say is, maybe the best choice for you is the app service plan, because we don't have any timeouts on that. Now, obviously, consumption plan is nice because you get the nice billing benefits there. But if you really need to do the long running things and you love functions and the event driven architectures, definitely look at our app service plan. Let's see, I showed durable functions as well. If you do have a long running process and you can break it up into multiple steps, durable functions may be a good option for you as well. I showed that counter example. that is a function which actually runs, potentially forever. So, that's an option as well, if you can break it up into small steps.
Awesome. I'll do one more for you, and then maybe you can ask me some, because I saved the easy ones for me here. So let's see. Ryan was asking, how do I properly handle exceptions when dealing with output bindings?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I asked this question one time too. Basically, so the way output bindings work is actually a little bit depends on which output binding you're using. But effectively, what's a good way to kind of describe this? So then there are multiple ways that you can use output bindings. There's output parameters of your function if you're using C#. There's also kind of this concept of an iasync collector, again, if you're using C#. And then with JavaScript, it's a little bit different. For the most part, what happens is, especially in the latter cases, the output binding actually gets executed after your function is done running. And so in those cases, you don't actually have a good way to kind of handle the, what happens if there is an exception and failure, because it's outside of the context of your code. Obviously what you can do is you can, look into your app insights and get more information about, why it failed, to at least follow up there. Yeah, so not a great story, but definitely, we'd love to hear more feedback from you guys if you need more control into that. I think there are some features that we are working on which could help with some of this. I know the filters feature, I don't know if we've talked about that on the webcast before, but there may be some interesting options there.
Yeah, no, definitely something great for us to explore. Now, we joke, but we love those tough questions that turns. We're on the product side, so we take those to investigate what can we do better. So awesome. I wonder if you want to ask me those so it doesn't feel like I'm asking myself.
Sure. So let's see. So I'm just going to look at your screen here to see the questions. All right. So we have a question from Dan saying, hi, what is the next big thing Azure Functions hopes to release to make it better? This could be anything from source control, file management, more support for current languages. Eduardo, what are we doing? What can you tell us?
I thought we had agreed on easy questions, but okay. So let's see. So what's interesting is I was looking back, and since end of September, when we start having all these conferences, we've done 12 different launches. Like it's kind of crazy the rhythm we're running here. And one thing we haven't stopped to do is really to take some of our preview features and do some of the quality work to take them to general availability. I talked today about proxies being generally available, but there's a lot that we've been launching to get your feedback, community feedback, that we need to take that to the quality bar. We can make it generally available. So to be honest, the main thing we're going to focus for a month or two at least is let's round those things up. Let's get more feedback and get them to the quality we need. So I think all the foundations of quality, performance, scalability, just raw quality, better documentation support is really something we want to focus on, like have dedicated time to do it before we go into another rush of new features. So it's not necessarily something super big and excitement. We continue to grow in the directions you've seen. We still want to grow, and I'll address that later, like more languages, more tooling, better triggers and output bindings. This is an ongoing direction for us to grow in where the community is and where people develop. But yeah, quality, I think, is next big one.
But keep sending us feedback for things that you want to see. We're still going to look at that and definitely prioritize the popular ones. Okay, what else do we got here? How can the community contribute to the Python efforts? It would be nice if support started with Python 3.x.
Not an easy one. Okay, so we, on V1, we released some languages in preview fashion that in reality were, as people start using it, it's not where we think it's ready for anyone to use it in production. It's not really the experience we would like to provide to our customers. So Python is one of them, just being for full clarity here, and PowerShell too. So, but the great thing, as you alluded to, is we did this worker now, the new language worker, on V2 that will allow for us to have a much better story as we add more languages to V2. In V2 right now, we have Node and C# and F#, but also Java that we announced mid-October. So Python and PowerShell are the next ones we're really targeted to build a real good experience around it. So the community contribution, that's a great point. It's one thing we want to have more is community contribution. So it's something that we're exploring how to better do this. Actually, maybe I'll volunteer Chris Anderson. He used to be a presenter on this webcast. He's taking a presenter leave. We'll be back maybe one of these days. So feel free to contact him if you're serious about contributing. You feel like you'll contribute to our languages. Do contact us or contact him directly, and we'll take questions.
Yeah, and include a GIF too.
Oh yeah, and meme. Yeah, it's important.
Make it funny. Include cats if you can. Yeah. He likes cats.
All right, so let's see if we have more. Okay, one for you then. Are the V2 .NET bits based on ASP.NET Core? If so, to what extent?
Yes, they are. To what extent? So, I mean, the underpinnings, we're definitely using ASP.NET Core. We definitely have to in order to run on, Mac or Linux. Let's see. We do have a compatibility layer with kind of the older style ASP.NET Web API things, so that you can still continue to use that style of programming for your HTTP triggers. But yes, we're definitely using the ASP.NET Core stuff under the covers. So yeah, party on that. It's really good stuff.
All right. So let's see what else we have here. This one, will you add cached Azure Functions with a shorter setup creation time? So
cached Azure Functions.
And I wasn't sure when he meant shorter creation time, like to create the new functions. It's from Josh. So maybe I can try this one. The creation time, and Josh, feel free to give us more details. We'll be happy to go into the details there. But in terms of cached Azure Functions, without going too long, we're thinking of ways in which we can sort of pre-cache some of the function apps, which is your container, into VMs to make them just execute faster in some cases where they've been idling for a while. So it's brand new, something we're still thinking about how to approach it. But in general, just reducing latency is a big priority for us. So something we're looking at.
Yeah, and Eduardo talked about, we're going to focus on quality a lot, over the next several weeks. And that's one of the areas that we really want to spend some time is, let's make things faster. Everybody likes faster, right?
Yeah,
and so we're going to spend some time looking at some of those and make things faster, whether it's, creating functions or, executing them after they've been idle for a while. So.
Yeah. And I think I kind of addressed this. There are two more questions, and I'll bundle them up in one, which is, please add support for PowerShell and Azure Functions. We don't believe the initial support in V1 is that great, so we want to add, like in V2, much better story for PowerShell. So, and someone comments that our wiki message might discourage people. They might feel like it's not a priority. So I just want to clarify that it is very important. Is like I said, Python, PowerShell are the languages we're going to invest on. So
yep.
So we'll just the wiki, just so the messaging says that we're committed to this. We can't talk about the timeline quite yet, but it's something that's definitely high on our list. All right, I guess I have more. Okay, sorry, there were more added here, and I probably only have like 1 minute, so I'll take one of the questions.
People angrily tell
There's a bunch of backstage people here doing gestures here. I haven't done this live TV before. All right, so let's see. Where does the counter state resides? Storage account?
So this must be a durable functions question. Yes, so the state is in Azure Storage. So when you have a function app, you have a storage account associated with it. And so behind the scenes, we're shoving stuff into Azure Storage. So it's there. You can actually go and look for it. Check out the documentation. There's more details if you want to go and kind of troll through it yourself and see what's going on.
A good one. All right. Josh asking, any movement on having hybrid connections on functions, but consumption plan? Common use case for me to get on-premise data. Would like me to support in Azure Functions. So yes, in Azure Functions Run Dedicated does support hybrid connections. We see folks using it. We see folks that what they do is they put some part of their solution on the consumption plan, and the part that does the hybrid connectivity on a dedicated resource. That's one solution we've seen. But that's good feedback for us to see what we can do to support hybrid connections on consumption plan. It's a little bit of a tricky one because as you the way you implement consumption plans is your functions can move where it is in terms of virtual machines and scale units. So hybrid connection would require you to tunnel those requests through a VNet or through the network. So the fact that your function can be in several places makes it this a harder feature for us to implement.
All right, so that's about all the time we have, I think.
Is that all the time?
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay, sorry, we missed one question, but this was great. The questions were really allowed us to talk about the roadmap and the direction we're going. Really appreciate like you guys watching and sending the questions beforehand. The community contribution blog post that we've seen, super excited. Just before I was doing this, I saw someone that did new things with Java that we hadn't seen before. So keeping at it. Thanks a lot for the support. Thanks so much, Chris, for participating with us on the webcast.
Thanks for letting me come. All righty.
All right, thanks a lot, guys.
Bye.
Oh, Chris is here.
There we go.
Okay,
The rest of the team. All support team.
Yay, the one doing the gestures.
And Alex.
Shut it down. Shut it down.